I don't know when you're going to listen this, but I can tell you when it started. I was out for a walk alone in the woods when the entity came for me. It was beyond a blur. It was, for lack of a better term, absence of meaning. Where it hid, there were no trees. Where it crept closer, there was no grass. Through the arc it leapt at me, there was no breeze of motion. There was no air at all. As it struck, I felt the distinct sensation of claws puncturing me somewhere unseen, somewhere I'd never felt before. My hands and arms and legs and torso seemed fine and I wasn't bleeding, but I knew I'd been injured somehow. As I fearfully ran back home, I could tell that I was less. I was vaguely tired, and it was hard to focus at times. The solution at that early stage was easy. A big cup of coffee helped me feel normal again. For a while, that subtle drain on my spirit became lost in the ebb and flow of caffeine in my system. You could say my life began that week, actually, because that was when I met Marshi and I got along great, though, to be honest, I'm pretty sure I fell in love with her over the phone before we even met. It was almost as if the strong emotions of that first week made the entity fight back. It was still with me, latched on to some invisible part of my being. The first few incidents were minor, and I hardly worried about them. The color of a neighbor's car changed from dark blue to black one morning, and I stared at it before shaking my head and shrugging off the difference. 2 days later at work, a coworker's name changed from Fred to Dan. I carefully asked around, but everyone said his name had always been Dan. I figured I'd just been mistaken. Then, as ridiculous as this sounds, I was peeing in my bathroom at home when I suddenly found myself on a random street. I was still in my pajamas, pants down, and urinating, but now in full view of a dozen people at a bus stop. Horrified, I pulled up my clothes and ran before someone called the cops. I did manage to get home, but the experience forced me to admit that I was still in danger. The entity was doing something to me, and I didn't understand how to fight back. Mar showed up that evening, but she had her own key. "Hey," I asked her with confusion, "how'd you get a key?" She just laughed. "You're cute. Are you sure you're okay with this?" She opened a door and entered a room full of boxes. I know living together is a big step, especially when we've only been dating 3 months. Living together? I'd literally just met her the week before. Thing was, my mother had always called me a smart cookie for a reason. I knew when to shut my yap. Instead of causing a scene, I told her everything was fine, and then I went straight to my room and began investigating. My things were just as I had left them, with no sign of a 3-month gap in habitation, but I did find something out of the ordinary: the date. I shivered angrily as I processed the truth. The entity had eaten 3 months of my life. What the hell was I facing? What kind of creature could consume pieces of one's soul like that? I'd missed the most exciting part of a new relationship, and I would never understand any shared stories or in-jokes from that period. Something absurdly precious had been taken from me, and I was furious. That fury helped suppress the entity. I never imbibed alcohol. I drank coffee religiously. I checked the date every time I woke up. For 3 years, I managed to live each day while observing nothing more than minor alterations. A social fact here and there, someone's job, how many kids they had, that sort of thing, the layout of nearby streets, the time my favorite television show aired, that kind of thing. Always, those changes reminded me the creature still had its claws sunk into my spirit. Not once in 3 years did I ever let myself zone out. One day, I grew careless. I let myself get really into the season finale of my favorite show. It was gripping, a fantastic story. Right at the height of the action, a young boy came up to my lounger and shook my arm. Surprised, I asked, "Who are you? How did you get in here?" He laughed and smiled brightly. "Silly daddy." My heart sank in my chest. I knew immediately what had happened. After a few masked questions, I discovered that he was 2 years old and that he was my son. The agony and heartache filling my chest was nearly unbearable. Not only had I missed the birth of my son, I would never see or know the first years of his life. Mar and I had obviously gotten married and started a family in the time I'd lost, and I had no idea what joys or pains those years contained. It was snowing outside. Holding my sudden son in my lap, I sat and watched the flakes fall outside. What kind of life was this going to be if slips in concentration could cost me years? I had to get help. The church had no idea what to do. The priests didn't believe me and told me I had a health issue rather than some sort of possession. The doctors didn't have any clue. Nothing showed up on all their scans and tests, but they happily took my money in return for nothing. By the time I ran out of options, I decided to tell Mar there was no way to know what this all looked like from her side. What was I like when I wasn't there? Did I still take our son to school? Did I still do my job? Clearly, I did, because she seemed to be none the wiser, but I still had a horrible feeling that something must have been missing in her life when I wasn't actually home inside my own head. But the night I set up a nice dinner in preparation, she arrived not by unlocking the front door, but by knocking on it. I answered, and found that she was in a nice dress. She was happily surprised by the settings on the table. A fancy dinner for a second date? I knew you were sweet on me. Thank the Lord I knew when to keep my mouth shut. If I'd gone on about being married and having a son, she might have run for the hills. Instead, I took her coat and sat down for our second date. Through carefully crafted questions, I managed to deduce the truth. This really was our second date. She saw relief and happiness in me, but interpreted that as dating jitters. I was just excited to realize that the entity wasn't necessarily eating whole portions of my life. The symptoms, as I was beginning to understand them, were more like the consequences of a shattered soul. The creature had wounded me, broken me into pieces. Perhaps I was to live my life out of order, but at least I would actually get to live it. And so it went for a few years, from my perspective. While minor changes in politics or geography would happen daily, major shifts in my mental location only happened every couple months. When I found myself in a new place and time in my life, I just shut up and listened, making sure to get the lay of the land before doing anything to avoid making mistakes. On the farthest flung leap yet, I met my 6-year-old grandson, and I asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. He said, writer. I told him that was a fine idea. Then I was back in month 2 of my relationship with Mar, and I had the best night with her on the riverfront. When I say the best, I mean the best. Knowing how special she would become to me, I asked her to move in. I got to live through what I'd missed the first go-around, and I came to understand that I was never mentally absent. I would always be there, eventually. When we were moving her boxes in, she stopped for a moment and said she marveled at my great love, as if I'd known her for a lifetime and never once doubted she was the one. That was the first time I'd truly laughed freely and wholeheartedly since the entity had wounded me. She was right about my love for her, but for exactly the reason she'd considered a silly romantic analogy. I had known her my whole life, and I'd come to terms with my situation and found peace with it. It wasn't so bad to have sneak peeks at all the best parts ahead. But of course I wouldn't be writing this if it hadn't gotten worse. The entity was still with me. It had not wounded me and departed like I'd wanted to believe. The closest I can describe my growing understanding was that the creature was burrowing deeper into my psyche, fracturing it into smaller pieces. Instead of months between major shifts, I began having only weeks. Once I noticed that trend, I feared my ultimate fate would be to jump between times in my life heartbeat by heartbeat, forever confused, forever lost. Only an instant in each time meant I would never be able to speak with anyone else, never be able to hold a conversation, never express or receive love. As the true depth of that fear came upon me, I sat in an older version of me and watched the snow falling outside. That was the one constant in my life. The weather didn't care who I was or what pains I had to face. Nature was always there. The falling snow was always like a little hook that kept me in a place. The pure emotional peace it brought was like a panacea on my mental wounds, and I'd never yet shifted while watching the pattern of falling white and thinking of the times I'd gone sledding or built a snow fort as a child. A teenager touched my arm. Grandpa. He'd startled me out of my thoughts, so I was less careful than usual. Who are you? He half grinned, as if not sure whether I was joking. Handing me a stack of papers, he said, "It's my first attempt at a novel. Would you read it and tell me what you think?" Ah, of course, pursuing that dream of being a writer, I see. He burned bright red, trying to anyway. All right, run off. I'll read this right now. The words were blurry, and annoyed, I looked for glasses I probably had for reading. Being old was terrible, and I wanted to leap back into a younger year, but not before I read his book. I found my glasses in a sweater pocket and began leafing through. Mar puttered in and out of the living room, still beautiful, but I had to focus. I didn't know how much time I would have there. It seemed that we had relatives over. Was it Christmas? A pair of adults and a couple kids I didn't recognize tromped through the hallway, and I saw my son, now adult, walk by with his wife on the way out the door. As a group, the extended family began sledding outside. Finally, I finished reading the story, and I called out for my grandson. He rushed down the stairs and into the living room. How was it? Well, it's terrible, I told him truthfully, but it's terrible for all the right reasons. You're still a young man, so your characters behave like young people, but the structure of the story itself is very solid. I paused. I didn't expect it to turn out to be a horror story. He nodded. It's a reflection of the times. Expectations for the future are dismal, not hopeful like they used to be. You're far too young to be aware like that, I told him. An idea occurred to me. If you're into horror, do you know anything about strange creatures? Sure, I read everything I can. I love it. Warily, I scanned the entrances to the living room. Everyone was busy outside. For the first time, I opened up to someone in my life about what I was experiencing. In hushed tones, I told him about my fragmented consciousness. For a teenager, he took it well. You're serious? Yes. He donned the determined look of a grown man accepting a quest. I'll look into it, see what I can find out. You should start writing down everything you experience. Build some data. Maybe we can map your psychic wound. Wow, sounds like a plan. I was surprised. That made sense, and I hadn't expected him to have a serious response. But how will I get all the notes in one place? Let's come up with somewhere for you to leave them, he said, frowning with thought. Then I'll get them, and we can trace the path you're taking through your own life, see if there's a pattern. For the first time since the situation had gotten worse, I felt hope again. How about under the stairs? Nobody ever goes under there. Sure, he turned and left the living room. I peered after him. I heard him banging around near the stairs. Finally, he returned with a box, laid it on the carpet, and opened it to reveal a bursting stack of papers. He exclaimed, "Holy crap!" But of course, being a teenager, he didn't really say crap. Taken aback, I blinked rapidly, forgiving his cussing because of the shock. Did I write those? He looked up at me with wonder. Yeah, or you will. You still have to write them and put them under the stairs after this. He gazed back down at the papers, then covered the box. So you probably shouldn't see what they say. That could get weird. That much I understood. Right. He gulped. There are like 50 boxes under there, all filled up like this. Deciphering these will take a very long time. His tone dropped to deadly seriousness. But I will save you, Grandpa, because I don't think anyone else can. Tears flowed down my cheeks then, and I couldn't help but sob once or twice. I hadn't realized how lonely I'd become in my shifting prison of awareness until I finally had someone who understood. Thank you so much. And then I was young again and at work on a random Tuesday. Once the sadness and relief faded, anger and determination replaced them. After I finished my work, I grabbed some paper and began writing. While the weeks shifted around me, while those weeks became days and then hours, I wrote every single spare moment about when and where I thought I was. I put them under the stairs out of order. My first box was actually the 30th, and my last box was the first. Once I had over 50 boxes written from my perspective, and once my shifting became a matter of minutes, I knew it was up to my grandson to take it from there. I put my head down and stopped looking. I couldn't stand the river of changing awareness any longer. Names and places and dates and jobs and colors and people were all wrong and different. I'd never been older. I sat watching the snow fall. A man of at least 30 that I vaguely recognized entered the room. Come on, I think I finally figured it out. I was so frail that moving was painful. Are you him? Are you my grandson? Yes. He took me to a room filled with strange equipment and sat me in a rubber chair facing a large mirror twice the height of a man. The pattern finally revealed itself. How long have you worked on this? I asked him, aghast. Tell me you didn't miss your life like I'm missing mine. His expression was both stone cold and furiously resolute. It'll be worth it. He brought 2 thin metal rods close to my arm and then nodded at the mirror. Look, This shock is carefully calibrated. The electric zap from his device was startling, but not painful. In the mirror, I saw a rapid arcing light silhouette appear above my head and shoulder. The electricity moved through the creature like a wave, briefly revealing the terrible nature of what was happening to me. A bulging leech-like mouth was wrapped around the back of my head, coming down to my eyebrows and touching each ear, and its slug-like body ran over my shoulder and into my very soul. It was a parasite, and it was feeding on my mind. My now-adult grandson held my hand as I took in the horror. After a moment, he asked, "Removing it is going to hurt very badly. Are you up for this?" Fearful, I asked, "Is Mar here?" His face softened. "No, not for a few years now." I could tell from his reaction what had happened, but I didn't want it to be true. "How?" "We have this conversation a lot," he responded. "Are you sure you want to know? It never makes you feel better." Tears brimmed in my eyes. "Then I don't care if it hurts or if I die. I don't want to stay in a time where she's not alive." He made a sympathetic noise of understanding and then returned to his machines to hook several wires, diodes, and other bits of technology to my limbs and forehead. While he did so, he talked. "I've worked for 2 decades to figure this out, and I've had a ton of help from other researchers of the occult. This parasite doesn't technically exist in our plane. It's one of the lesser spawns of mu sup beta mu, and it feeds on the plexus of mind, soul, and quantum consciousness reality. When details like names and colors of objects changed, you weren't going crazy. The web of your existence was merely losing strands as the creature ate its way through you." I didn't fully understand. I looked up in confusion as he placed a circlet of electronics like a crown on my head in exact line with where the parasite's mouth had ringed me. "What's mu beta mu?" He paused his work and grew pale. "I forgot that you wouldn't know. You're lucky, believe me." After a deep breath, he began moving again and placed his fingers near a few switches. "Ready? This is carefully tuned to make your nervous system extremely unappetizing to the parasite, but it's basically electroshock therapy." I could still see Mar's smile. Even though she was dead, I'd just been with her moments ago. "Do it." The click of a switch echoed in my ears, and I almost laughed at how mild the electricity was. It didn't feel like anything, at least at first. Then I saw the mirror shaking and my body within that image convulsing. Oh no, it did hurt. Nothing had ever been more painful. It was just so excruciating that my mind hadn't been able to immediately process it. As my vision shook and fire burned in every nerve in my body, I could see the reflected trembling light silhouette of the parasite on my head as it writhed in agony equal to mine. It had claws, 6 clawed lizard-like limbs under its leech-like body, and it cut into me in an attempt to stay latched on. The electricity made my memories flare. Mar's smile was foremost, lit brightly in front of a warm fire as the snow fell past the window behind her. The edges of that memory began lighting up, and I realized that my life was one continuous stretch of experience. It was only the awareness of it that had been fragmented by that feasting evil on my back. I'd never managed to be there for the birth of my son. I'd jumped around it a dozen times, but never actually lived it. For the first time, I got to hold Mar's hand and be there for her. No, that moment had shifted seamlessly into holding her hand as she lay in a hospital bed for a very different reason. Not this. God, why? It was so merciless to make me remember this. I broke down in tears as nurses rushed into the room. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to experience it. I'd seen all the good parts, but I hadn't wanted the worst part, the inevitable end that all would one day face. It wasn't worth it. It was tainted. All that joy was given back 10,000-fold as pain. The fire in my body and in my brain surged to sheer white torture, and I screamed. My scream faded into a surprised shout as the machines and electricity and chair faded away. Snow was no longer falling around my life. I was out in the woods on a bright summer day. Oh God! I turned to see the creature approaching me. It was the same absence of meaning, the same blank on reality. It crept forward just like before, but this time it hissed and turned away. I stood, astounded at being young again and freed from the parasite. My grandson had actually done it. He'd made me an unappetizing meal, so the predator of mind and soul had moved on in search of a different snack. I returned home in a daze. And while I was sitting there processing all that had happened, the phone rang. I looked at it in awe and sadness. I knew who it was. It was Marjorie, calling for the first time for some trivial reason she'd admit 30 years later was made up just to talk to me. But all I could see was her lying in that hospital bed dying. It was going to end in unspeakable pain and loneliness. I would become an old man, left to sit by myself in an empty house, his soulmate gone long before him. At the end of it all, the only thing I would have left, sitting and watching the falling snow. But now, thanks to my grandson, I would also have my memories. It would be a wild ride, no matter how it ended. On a sudden impulse, I picked up the phone. With a smile, I asked, "Hey, who's this?" Even though I already knew. "Don't let them in." Addiction took our mother slowly, rocked her through it, and sung her to sleep sunk deep into the mattress on her bed. When her back teeth fell out, she left them on the side of the bathtub. I was 7, and I kept them in a matchbox, the missing pieces of her kept safe, so she wouldn't be lost forever. So maybe one day we could put her back together. Our house fell down around us, and we tried our best to raise ourselves. The ceilings had water damage, and the bottom stairs had dry rot, and in the winters the radiators would bleed rust. But it was still our house, and Annie made it a home. My sister Annie mothered me, with lopsided band-aids on bruised knees and lukewarm microwave meals. She told me ghost stories and didn't mind when I crawled into her bed later on, too scared to sleep alone. She taught me to dance, barefoot on the living room carpet, music channel on full volume on the TV, shaking our hips before they were fully grown. She always let me shower first so the water was hot, never complaining when she had to make do with cold. She brushed my hair every day before school, even when I screamed and hit her when she caught the tangles. Annie was dark-haired like her father, whoever he had been, but I was blonde. Annie was desperate to be blonde too, like Marilyn Monroe. Like Mom, I think she thought it would make them closer, remind Mom less of her dad. I'd give anything for her to have her hands in my hair one more time, even if it hurt. She moved to New York when I turned 18 and never came back. I still dream about her sometimes. Keeping up with our mother was impossible, and we learnt from a young age we would always be left behind. It didn't make it any easier. When she was drinking light, she shone, would wake us up at 3 a.m. with pancakes, dripping in cherry syrup. Sometimes when the weather was right and she'd had enough being drunk alone, she would call our school up and tell them we had both come down with summer sickness and we'd drive to the beach instead. I remember being 9 years old in the backseat of the car coming home after one of our ocean days, sucking the salt from my fingers. Annie had just dyed her hair blonde, her best friend Jane helping her bend over our kitchen sink. From behind, I couldn't tell who was mother and who was daughter, radio up and windows down blowing the sky inside. When she was drinking heavy, she'd be out all night, hair piled up like a beauty queen, eyes glazed over and ringed with glitter and black. Sometimes she'd be gone a day or two. She would never tell us when. One day we'd just wake up to an empty house and the fridge packed full, post-it note on the front with a smear of Mom's lipstick in the outline of a kiss, telling us she'd be back soon. Sometimes she'd bring guys home, filling the table with beer cans and ashtrays, smoke up to the ceiling, Mom lost in the haze. We'd sleep with pillows over our heads, trying to drown out the music they would blast until the a.m., and wake up to strangers at our kitchen table in the morning, asking us where we kept the coffee. When Mom drank too little, she fell apart. She wouldn't buy food, refrigerator a gaping hole in the wall. She'd chain smoke, leaving cigarette burns on the wallpaper up by the stairs like the walls were sick and decaying. She barely slept, walking around with blue half-moons under her eyes, knuckles raw. She would scream at the slightest thing. I remember once when I spilled a glass of juice on the couch. She looked over at me with dead eyes and dragged me off onto the carpet and then took every single cushion off the couch and into the backyard and set them on fire. Annie went to watch a while from the window and then sat next to me on the floor, backs pressed against the skeleton of the seats, head resting in the crater of my collarbones. When Mom drank, too much was the worst. She'd laugh too loud and too long at anything and everything until her mouth started to shake and she started crying at the breakfast table into her cereal. Annie shut down when Mom was like this, went somewhere deep inside herself where nobody could hurt her. She'd stay up until the morning watching old black and white movies on TV, whispering the lines she knew by heart like prayers. When I was 5, I'd cry when I'd find Mom passed out cold on her bed, sure she would never wake up. Annie would wipe my tears, tell me she was only sleeping just like the princesses in my storybook. We'd sit on Mom's bed together and wait for her to wake up. When we were older, I was the one who would pick Mom up off the bathroom floor again and again, and Annie would put her to bed, smoothing her hair off her face and the vomit from her mouth, changing her clothes if she'd pissed herself. Watching them then, there was no doubt that Annie was the mother now. It was October and I was 13, Annie 16. It was a Wednesday night and Mom had been gone for 2 days. She'd called us that morning from a pay phone, voice slurring down the line, telling us she was having the best time with all her new friends, hoped we were doing fine. When she asked me if I was having a good birthday, I hung up on her. My birthday had been the day before. Annie had given me a pile of presents, strawberry lip glosses, and glittery nail polishes. I didn't ask where she'd got the money for them. I didn't care. We'd taken the bus to the beach with Jane, eaten the birthday cake she had made for me, sand getting into the frosting. It tasted like sweetness and the sea, and I savored every bite and scrape of sugar against my teeth. We watched the sun go down, Annie snapping grainy photos on her shitty Nokia as I blew out my candles, wishing over and over that Mom wouldn't come home, that she'd just stay gone this time. But that Wednesday night, me and Annie weren't speaking. Anger hung heavy between us, seeping through the floorboards. It began when she tripped at the bottom of the stairs. We'd both laughed, Annie throwing her head back, gap between her front teeth catching the light. When I'd bent to pick her up, I'd caught her breath, warm against the freckles on my cheeks. I let go of her arms and she fell again, hitting the floor and grinning, shaking her hair from her face. Her breath was heavy with whiskey. I couldn't start picking her up too, couldn't watch her fall again and again. Just like Mom, I knew she'd never get back up. I'd stared down at her, blonde hair fallen into her eyes, and all I could see was our mother. And then I was running, feet slamming the hallway like heartbeats turned loose. I'd run for the kitchen and tipped every bottle we had down the sink, shoving Annie back as she fought to stop me, catching liquor on her fingers as it fell. She grabbed my shoulders and made me drop the very last bottle. It smashed between us on the floor, glass shards, shining like we'd dragged the stars out of the sky and broken them, pieces we could never put back. Outside, through the open windows, the sky turned pale gold, clouds a mess of pink and cream smeared across the horizon. I cried then, watching Annie on her knees picking up the pieces. That was Annie, always trying to fix things even when it was too late. The smell of food dragged me from my room, stomach-turning traitor inside my ribcage. Annie was cooking pasta, real food not made in a microwave. She'd set the table, Tammy Wynette singing softly from the CD player, Annie gently swaying her hips as she stirred the tomato sauce, rich and warm. As we ate in silence, with every bite I forgave her. Mom never cooked dinner, or remembered my favorite was spaghetti ever since I was a kid, or stayed sober long enough to sit up at a table. Annie wasn't Mom. We were washing the dishes when we first heard it. A moth was crawling down the inside of the pane, and I cracked the window to let it out into the dark. From the backyard came a faint sound. I tilted my head to listen as it was coming from far off. Crying? I figured it was Mika, the 2-year-old next door, having a tantrum loud enough for us to catch, or maybe even Lucky Strike, the cat that junkies down the street, begging for food like he sometimes did. I always wanted to feed him when he came around, winding over my ankles, but Annie always stopped me, saying once you started giving they never stopped taking. Looking back, I don't think she was talking about the cat. Annie flipped the Christmas lights strung up around the porch, and we sat on the plastic beach chairs watching the skies. When we were little, we'd sit outside, and Annie would tell me the names of all the constellations and the stories of how they came to be hung up in the night sky. I had to grow up before I realized she made them all up as she went along. It was a game we still liked to play now, making up ridiculous stories for the shapes we could pick out. Ah, yes, that one there is the Coors Light. It got there when God dropped it out of his convertible window and never picked it up, she said, nodding sagely and hiding her smile. Of course, I said, waving my hands and pointing up past the power lines. Right next to the ashtray, left there by angels on a smoke break. Yeah, they say if you wish on it, all your dreams will come true, said Annie, grinning. She stopped laughing, voice quieter, face tilted up to all those dead stars. Let's wish, Emmy, let's wish, so we did. The sound of crying interrupted us. It was closer this time, and definitely human. We turned to each other, confused. Annie shrugged and I squinted out into the black. It sounded like a baby, lost and tired and alone. "It must be Mika," I said, slowly getting to my feet. "Maybe he walked around the back. Shit, do you want to call Connie and tell her we'll bring him over?" Annie didn't reply, and I sighed, rolling my eyes. Guess I'll do everything then. I stepped off the porch, grass soft against my heels. The air smelled like it might rain, fresh and clean and growing. A promise unfulfilled. Annie's voice was strained. I turned to her, smiling. It died on my face when I saw the look on her own. Get inside now." She was staring out into the dark, past me, opening the door with one hand behind her, fingers fumbling on the catch. I froze, barefoot in the dirt. I'd found what she was looking at. In the bushes by the back fence was a person, crouched with their knees tucked up neat under the chin, arms wrapped around legs. Their mouth hung wide, softly opening and closing as he cried. Like a child, lost in the dark. Not like a child, but a someone pretending. Mimicking the sound, open and closed out in the blackness. Suddenly they straightened, snapping upright face still hidden by the black. They were tall and thin, too thin to be a normal person. Panic made me move, animal instincts left over from the days we lived up in the trees carrying me forward. I was faster than Annie, dragging her inside and slamming the door behind us, hearing it bounce on its hinges as I locked it. We watched as the person slowly walked towards the house, steps deliberate and long. Annie reached for my hand, holding me tight and turned me to face her, holding my shoulders. "Don't turn around, Emmy. Don't turn around." Instinctively, I started to look over my shoulder out into the darkness. Annie grabbed my face, hard, and shook her head. I knew then she was serious. Her voice cracked, and she cleared her throat, gripping my hand tight enough to hurt, nails digging in, grounding herself. I looked down at our fingers interlocked, both of us grown from the same bones. "I'm gonna call the cops and everything is going to be." Her voice faltered, stuttering. Tears spilled over her lashes, dripping like the promise of rain. Annie never cried. "Your phone's on the porch," she whispered, and bile crawled its way up my throat. Her phone was upstairs, charging. A soft tap-tap-tapping filled the silence. Annie turned to the window, eye whites showing her eyes were so wide. It was the sound of someone's forehead against the glass, slowly, over and over. They started to speed up, faster and harder, skin meeting glass until they was slamming into the window hard enough to shake the panes. The tapping stopped, and I was about to ask Annie if I could look now when she screamed, followed by the sound of cracking glass and the loudest slam yet. Whoever was in our yard had just smashed their face hard enough into the window to break it. We ran upstairs, two at a time, skipping the ones caved in with dry rot on instinct. I turned behind me once and Annie yanked my face back before I could see. The sound of broken glass echoed behind us as we made it to the bathroom, locking the door. A thin, wailing cry, like a baby calling for its mother, filled the hallway, trapped between the walls and locked doors. Annie threw her back against the door, feet jammed up against the bathtub, clutching the knife she had grabbed from the kitchen. I did the same, shoulder to shoulder. Slow footsteps started on the stairs, deliberate and casual. The crying had become mocking, almost laughter, shrill bursts of sound and then giggles, high-pitched and abruptly stopping before starting again. The first door on the upstairs floor was my bedroom, and we heard the distinct sound of it slamming open. They were looking for us. "What the fuck is going on?" I asked Annie, not even bothering to brush away the tears that I couldn't stop falling. I watched my sister pick herself up off the floor and brace her hands on the door as we heard the sound of a second door slamming open. Mom's room. The next room on the hallway was the bathroom. Annie pulled me to my feet and handed me the knife. I shook my head and pushed it back to her, terrified of what would happen if I had to use it. Annie shoved me and pressed the knife into my hands, thumb pressing hard enough on the blade to bleed. I watched my sister's blood drip down her wrist, a winding red road, still pushing into my hands despite the pain. I took the knife. Something slammed against the wall that Mom's room shared with the bathroom. A high-pitched wail followed. I held my breath, could feel my heartbeat in the base of my throat, a wild and frantic thing. "I'm gonna get the phone from my room." I shook my head violently, about to argue. Annie clamped a hand over my mouth. I could taste the blood on her hand, salty and sweet, like birthday cake by the ocean. Yes, I'm gonna get the phone and I'm gonna call the cops and we're going to be okay. I shook my head again. It's the only way. When I go, I need you to lock the door and you don't open it for anything or anyone. Not for me, not for anyone. Promise me. I shook my head and Annie pressed her hand into my mouth, crushing my teeth against my lips so it made my eyes water. Yes, promise me, Em. Something smashed in the room next door. Annie brushed the hair off my face, gently tucking it behind my ear. Promise, she mouthed and unlocked the door as slowly as possible, bolt scraping gently. I watched the curve of her shoulder disappear into the black hall outside, like the moon in eclipse, and then she was gone. I couldn't move or breathe for a second, and then I slammed the bolt shut just as something bounced off the outside of the door. A high-pitched scream followed, handle rattling up and down hard enough to pop one of the screws. I watched it roll towards me on the tiles, and then silence. I sat with my back to the door, holding the knife and wishing I was holding Annie's hand instead. Still silence. Nothing but me and my lungs slowly filling the room with my breath. Em, came a voice through the door. I started, hands gripping the knife. Honey, what's going on? Mom, my voice cracked. Mama, is that you? I wrapped my arms around myself, shaking, trying to keep myself still. Sweetie, it's okay, just open the door. It's okay, just let me in. The handle rattled again, gentler. Just let me in, it's all okay. She banged on the door and I took my handle of the bolt. Honey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I missed your birthday. I'm sorry I'm such a terrible mother. Please. Her voice broke and she started to cry. Just let me in, baby, I'm so sorry. I screwed my eyes shut. She sounded so sad and so lost. I just wanted her to hold me like when I was a kid and I'd come in off the swings with a scraped knee. Maybe this time she meant it. Maybe it would all be okay. My hand found its way to the bolt again. My sister's voice came through the door, warm and gentle. Yeah, Emily, let us in, it's all okay. My hand froze on the bolt and I tightened my grip on the knife. Annie never called me by my full name. A hand banged on the door, handle rattling. Emily, let us in. Annie's voice became low and guttural, followed by the same shrill giggles from before. Mom spoke now, pleading and crying, voice getting louder and louder. Let us in, let us in, let us in. Over and over again, punctuated by her fists on the door. I thought about demons and monsters, all the bedtime stories we pray don't crawl out from under the bed. That's not my sister and you're not my mother, I screamed through the door, hands over my head. I climbed into the bathtub and curled in a ball, cradling myself, knife clutched to my chest. I didn't know what it was outside that door, but I knew it wasn't Annie. It wasn't the voice that yelled at when I changed TV channel, the one that sang me happy birthday, the one that told me I was smart even when I got bad grades, the one that read me stories about princesses that never wake up. It wasn't human. Bangs and yells came from downstairs, followed by the footsteps of people running. A low guttural howl ripped through the house, filling the room until I felt like I was drowning in the sound, and then the door was kicked in. I screamed, covering my eyes, waiting to die. Arms found me and lifted me from the tub, carrying me from the room. I looked at the outside of the door as I was carried downstairs. It was covered in long scraping claw marks, dragged down to the floor. Pillows ripped apart covered the hallway in soft down, like it had snowed inside. I watched them drift slowly as men in uniforms checked each of the rooms that looked like they had been torn apart by something feral. Outside in our driveway were police cars and an ambulance. In the middle of it all was Annie, bathed in blue and red light as it washed over her, lit up in the dark like a neon angel, face aglow. I threw myself from the cop's shoulder and ran to her, holding us both together, broken pieces and all, standing under all those constellations we made up. Gentle screaming came from the ambulance, which rocked occasionally. Annie gently turned my head away, smiling so sadly it made my chest ache as I understood. Turns out there was no demon. No wild animal or bad men trying to break in. Just Mom, out of her mind on booze and drugs and everything in between, coming to the end of a week-long binge. Something had finally broken inside her head, and this time we couldn't put her back together no matter how hard we tried. Sometimes you fall one last time and you never get back up. Annie had seen her in the garden, blood dribbling from her mouth, track marks bulging on her forearms like unmapped roads, rail thin and desperate for one more hit, one more fix. She'd searched the kitchen for all the drink I'd thrown away, and when she hadn't found it, had come to hunt for the stash she hid in the bathroom. She hadn't wanted me, just the drugs on the other side of the door, so high she could mimic Annie's voice almost perfectly. Turns out the real monsters are the ones that eat you alive slowly, the kind that come in a bottle or a needle, or at the end of a long list of reasons why you can't get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes the monsters are the ones that raise you or love you the most, but it's up to you if you let them in. Because you are my baby. My mother had the most beautiful teeth. Her teeth are my first memory. I remember them, long and white and bared in a ferocious grin, shining under the full moon as she told me a story. Not a fairy tale or picture book, but the story. The story of how I'd come to her, or rather, how she'd come to me. When I was very small, too small to remember anything at all, my mother stole me from a man and took me to live in the forest. She stole me not as an act of love, but as an act of revenge. Though I was desperate to know, she never told me what needed revenging. One night I finally asked, "Why won't you tell me?" "Because you are my baby," she whispered in her low, wet voice. She stroked my face with long fingers. Her teeth glittered under the stars, rich and pale as polished ivory. My baby will never hear or see or know the cruelties that haunt me. Cruelty was not the only thing my mother knew that I did not, although it was the only thing she refused to teach me. My mother tried very hard to teach me everything else she knew. Unfortunately, I was a very poor pupil indeed. My mother was a remarkable huntress. She felled elk and bear effortlessly. Sometimes she slid into the lake without so much as a ripple and returned hours later with a monstrous fish clamped in her jaws. Because hunting came so easily to her, Mother expected me to learn quickly. "Men hunt," she hissed. "They have always hunted, so shall you." But I could not hunt, not like her. My small, soft fingers were no match for her lethal claws. My clumsy little body, somehow so susceptible to both the heat and the cold, trailed after her whip-like predator's form. Mother caught deer and foxes with her beautiful teeth, striking from the shadows like a snake. By contrast, my dull teeth could not even crush rabbit bones. I persevered but did not improve. One night, while Mother snaked through the shadows, communing with trees and evading the dark things prowling the night, I curled up and wept. She found me that way, weak and weeping. I covered my eyes and held my breath. I knew it was useless. Mother could hear my heartbeat from the other side of the hill, so she surely knew I was crying, but that small scrap of pride was all I had. Mother stood there for a long while, then she crept forward and covered me with fresh leaves before lying beside me. "I will feed you always," she whispered, "because you are my baby." In addition to hunting, my mother was a phenomenal creator of shelters. Sometimes she lived within the earth, snaking through loam and tree roots like treasure-hoarding dragons of old. Sometimes she lived in the trees. Many nights I watched in awe as her bones elongated and tore through her rough skin, stretching upward to twist among the branches like an ancient spider god. I would wait patiently, sometimes for hours, as Mother communed with the spirits buried in the roots. And sometimes she lived in the shadows, creeping through the darkness to flush out food and threat alike. So Mother tried to teach me to dig burrows, but I could not dig like her. I was too small and too soft, and far too frightened of the bugs and moles that tunneled through the earth. So she tried to teach me to live among the tree branches, to rest and listen as the redwoods murmured the long, strange histories of the earth. But my bones could not stretch like Mother's. I could not twist my arms to match the branches. My skin could not interlock with the tree bark, and my blood was too sluggish to melt into the sap. So Mother tried to teach me to live in the shadows, but the darkness terrified me. Every night, I hid and wept, imagining the legs of centipedes crawling across my skin. All the night creatures reveled in my fear. Owls swooped down to taunt me and bats torpedoed toward me, giggling in their shrill, squeaking voices until Mother slapped them out of the sky. Finally, Mother realized the futility of these lessons, so she dug a deep burrow just for me. She lined it with leaves and slurped the worms and roaches from the walls. When she finished, I burst into tears. "Why do you weep?" she rasped. "Because you do everything for me." I knew the laws of nature. I knew the laws of forest creatures and their young that were weak were killed in the nest. Young that could not learn to fend for themselves were abandoned to die. I was weak and soft and coated in terrible, ugly scars. Why do you do everything for me? Mother snaked forward, long, large hands sinking into the earth. She curled around me and pulled me close. Because you are my baby. Mother did not always live in the burrow with me. She roamed the mountains. She burrowed with moles, slithered with snakes, grazed with elk, hunted with wolves, stood with trees. When I was very small, I thought she ate the forest. But it was not that simple. She protected it, and in return it sustained her. My heart, she told me one rainy night, is the forest, so this is how it must be. As I grew older, I developed rudimentary survival skills. I shied away from hunting big game elk and deer, bears and boar because I did not protect the forest. I gave it nothing. I only took, so I took as little as I could. I trapped rabbits, fished the streams, and ate wild berries. I dared take nothing else. Once I could reliably feed myself, Mother stayed away for long stretches. Hours, then days, and finally weeks. I missed her terribly, with a deep, panicky ache. I confronted her about it one balmy spring evening. You leave me more and more, I accused. Soon you'll leave me forever. Never, she murmured. A breeze twined around us, raising goose flesh on my skin and rippling her long white hair. I will never leave you. But you do, I screamed. You already do. Before you came, I lived among the trees, listening to their warnings. I slept in the warm earth as worms and centipedes nibbled my skin. I spent many of your lifetimes within the forest, little ones so many lives at a time that I forgot my own name. I do not leave you. I have left the forest for you. I didn't come here, I sobbed. You took me. I did, she said, so I will never leave you. When you think I've left, silence yourself and listen. Listen for me the way I listen for the trees, the animals, and the stars. If you are silent and you are sincere, you will hear me. And then she left. Fury and jealousy seared my heart like a wildfire. She insulted me, she humiliated me, and after all that she left me. Left me for the centipedes and the wolves and the stupid, chittering bats. I don't need you, I screamed. An owl hooted angrily in response. I don't need you at all. Then I ran for my burrow. As the earthen door materialized before me, nodding with flowers and wild grasses, anger swelled inside me. It possessed me, this wild ball of misery born of my own endless fear and inadequacy. And it spoke to me. Why should you return to the burrow, it asked. Why indeed? It wasn't mine. It was Mother's. The entire forest belonged to Mother. Without her, the forest would have consumed me long ago. So I turned away from the burrow and kept running. I will find the end of the forest, I decided. I will leave it once and for all. I ran for days, in the process treating the forest with contempt. I stripped the trees of their leaves to make nightly beds. I threw rocks at birds and rabbits. I uprooted bushes and stripped entire groves of their berries, eating until I threw up from sheer excess. Then I ate again. Not out of hunger, not out of any need, but out of malice. And one day, long after spring ceded to summer in a verdant explosion of heat and greenery, I heard voices. I froze immediately. The only voice I knew was Mother's wet and low, an earthy, rib-shaking whisper. These voices were nothing like Mother's. They were high and somehow infantile, with strange, shrill notes. These voices, they were like mine. Trembling, I dropped low and crept through the underbrush. Sun-warmed leaves brushed against my face, smooth but painfully crisp. The sun was taking its toll on them. I snaked over the ground, pretending I was Mother, slipping through the forest like an invisible snake. I reached a break in the trees and peered through. In a small clearing were 4 creatures. They had pink skin and wore heavy clothing that looked suffocating. Their hands were small and soft. Their faces were smooth and baby-like, somehow half-formed, wide-eyed and rounded, with soft noses and plump flesh. I touched my face flat and smooth and looked down at myself, mud-streaked, deeply tanned, and marked with a hideous mass of scars, but still soft. Hairless, small, weak. There was no mistaking it. These things in the woods, these overdressed, half-formed beings with small teeth and no claws and overlarge eyes were like me. They were men. I stood up, propelled by panicky excitement, and strode forward. All at once, they froze. "What the hell?" one whispered. He lifted something in his arms and pointed it at me. It was long and strange to me. Inorganic, not alive, with a wooden handle and a gleaming tube. Just then I realized something. The forest was silent. A few birds chirped and sang, and a few bugs emitted their persistent drone. But the vast majority birds, insects, trees were silent. No rabbits, no deer, certainly no bears. These things, these creatures like me, these men had silenced the earth. They'd stolen the forest from itself. We stared at each other for a long time as ever-growing summer heat filled the clearing like an invisible pool. "Mother," I whispered, "Mother, please help me." She did not, so I turned and ran. The men immediately pursued. I could hear them, yelling, crushing the undergrowth, stamping on blossoms and bugs, snapping branches as they ran. The forest's deathly silence was worse than any cry. "There it is," one of them screamed. A second later, the forest exploded. A deafening boom shook the trees and ate through the air as pain erupted on my shoulder. I didn't dare stop or look. I pressed on, running and crying as the men came after me. The forest seemed to punish me for my earlier cruelty. Brambles scratched my legs. Stones cut my feet. Branches swiped at my face, leaving deep, stinging runnels. I thanked the forest for its kindness. I thanked it for punishing me, rather than stopping me. The men gasped and wailed amongst themselves. "What the hell is it? I don't know, I don't know." "Is it a kid? Look at its face. Look at its fucking face. That isn't a kid." Something suddenly filled my ears, drowning the sounds of the men and the forest. A deep, musical rushing, like birdsong, transformed into a turbulent river. And then Mother came, erupting from the trees like a great beast of old. But that's what she was, after all. A great beast, surely a demon of the ancient world. She pounced upon the men, batting them the way a house cat bats its toys. She clamped one between her claws, squeezing until his head separated and went rolling across the ground. One by one Mother caught and tore them, shredding them the way she shredded leaves for my bedding. Blood streaked the forest, turning the dirt to mud and dripping from the trees like sluggish rain. Mother dug her claws into the skull of the last survivor and cracked it open like a fruit. Blood and gray brain glistened in the sunlight. The man screamed and screamed and screamed. Mother leaned down and extended her tongue. It curled outward, pale and orange gold like sunrise on a cold, clear morning, and delicately slurped his brains. Curl by curl, like so many worms from my burrow walls. By the time he stopped screaming, the forest had returned to its loud, familiar glory. Murmuring trees, singing birds, skittering insects, grazing deer. I smiled and ran to Mother. She reared up and screamed, "See what you've done." Terror paralyzed me. I looked helplessly at her blazing eyes, contorted face runneled with earth and wildflowers, sun-bleached bone and pale, spongy rot. My mother, my beautiful demon mother who claimed me out of revenge and raised me out of obligation, staring at me like I was a man. When you stone a bird, my heart stops. When you break a branch, my bones snap. When you selfishly strip the shrubs of their fruit, of their very birthright, my skin blisters. When you hurt the forest, she roared, my heart bleeds. I fell to my knees and hid my face. Mother rushed forward on her many limbs and wrapped long fingers around my throat. She lifted me up, dangling me over the forest floor. "I killed men for you, now more will come. They will trample, they will cut, they will burn. They will kill the bears and the cougars and the wolves, for they will blame the predators for what I have done for you. Do you see?" She shook me. The carnage below seemed to swing beneath me, a tapestry of blood-soaked earth and ruined corpses. "Do you see?" "Yes, Mother," I whispered. "I see." She dropped me. I bit the ground with such force it knocked the wind out of me. Mother pulled back and busied herself with one of the corpses. I looked up, shaking. Birds watched from the trees, quick and curious and full of condemnation. I averted my eyes as tears spilled. Mother returned to me. She extended an arm and opened her hand. Upon her large palm were 4 eyes and a large, glistening heart. I stared at them blankly, then looked up at her. 4 eyes, she said, one from each man, and the heart of the one that shot you. Eat. My lip quivered. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gore in my mother's hand. A heart and eyes, raw and plump, alive just minutes ago. "Mother," I said, "please." "Are you of me?" she asked, "or are you of man?" The forest became painfully silent. The animals, the trees, and the insects, all waiting with bated breath. I am of you, Mother. I plucked the first eye from her palm. It was round and curiously firm, with a sort of firm, watery texture I associated with half-rotten fruits. The pink, wormy optic nerve dangled. For a terrible moment I thought I would vomit. Then I raised it to my lips and bit in. The eyes were awful, the heart even worse. Thick and almost impossible to chew. Mother had to tear it for me, slicing it into manageable pieces with her beautiful teeth. When I finished, Mother picked me up and, holding me tightly, streaked back to the burrow as night fell. That night I became ill. I shook and shivered and hallucinated for days. My mind bled with images of dangling eyes and glistening hearts and skulls cracked apart like pomegranates. Mother lay with me all the while, soothing me with ancient songs like birdsong turned to rivers and cooling me with her damp, earthy breath. Finally, the fever broke. I sat up, gasping as the last vestiges of my nightmare drifted away. Mother sat across the burrow, hunched over tiredly. "You are well," she said. "I am glad, for I must leave." I blinked tiredly. "Why?" "Men," she said. "But you killed them." "There are more," she said. "They creep into the forest, searching for their dead brethren. They are cutting the trees and crushing the flowers and killing the bears, my little one. If I don't stop them, they will even come for you. I have to stop them. My heart is the forest, and so are you. I must protect both." A lump rose in my throat. Shame like I'd never known enveloped me. "I'm so sorry." "You are my baby. Babies must learn. By learning they grow." "Mother," I said, "am I truly of man?" Mother closed her eyes. For a long time she did not speak. Then she drew a deep breath. "I took you from a cruel man. Listen, I will tell you now of the cruelties I endured." I listened, enraptured and horrified, as she spun her sorry tale. Mother was once a young, beautiful human woman. "Surely not more beautiful than you are now," I objected. "Listen," she said. Mother was alone in the world. She had no family or friends. She once had a family, but they harmed her greatly, so she ran away. She lived in the forest, in a small, ragged tent. She ate wild berries, fished the lake, and boiled water to drink. Laws are strange things. Though Mother hurt nothing and no one, she was breaking the law by living in the forest. She was found and caught and imprisoned. Separated from the trees and the birds, Mother faded quickly. Though she was only jailed for a short while, it nearly killed her. The day she was released was the best day of her life, or so she thought. No sooner had Mother gathered her meager belongings and exited the jail than a guard came up beside her. "Where are you headed to?" he asked. "I'll take you wherever you want to go." Mother was ecstatic. "Take me back to the forest," she said. The guard obliged, driving her toward the woods. Except he stopped too soon. He stopped at a house. His house, it turned out. The guard was a terrible man. He trapped Mother. He hurt her, tortured her, abused her in every way. He cut her open, he burned her, he snapped her bones. And he put a baby in her. Mother was so broken that he missed all signs of impending childbirth. When I came, Mother died. "He dumped me in a vat of acid," Mother told me, "and scattered my liquid remains among the trees. But then I heard you." Mother smiled faintly. Crumbles of dirt and root fell from her face. "I heard your cry, your need for me." I do not understand what Mother said next. It is difficult to translate. But the closest I can come is this. Everyone sings a song to those they love. Most aren't able to hear these songs. If you can't hear, it can't help you. But if you can hear it, a song is the most powerful thing in the world. It kills, it calls, it consumes, it destroys, it strengthens. And sometimes it resurrects. "When I reformed and breathed again, I stole you from your father," Mother said. "Then I brought you here because you are my baby." I wept silently because I didn't know what to say. "I must go," she said. "The trees and the animals need me now, so remember, little one, when you are silent and you are sincere, you will hear me." Then she whipped around like a wolf, a snake and hawk combined, and left. She did not return. At first I thought nothing of it. I had made a terrible mess. I had summoned men. I had caused the forest to bleed. Mother had a great deal of work ahead of her. But summer slowly bled into fall, and still Mother did not return. When the first snow came, dry and cold, skittering across the landscape like powder, I knew something was wrong. The snows deepened. The forest drifted into its winter sleep, cloaked in ice and fog. Every night I made myself silent. I mustered all the sincerity I could, and I listened for my mother's voice. It didn't come. I grew thin and sick. My skin burned even as I shivered. My chest grew congested, my throat so sore I couldn't sleep. My breath came in sharp, pained wheezes. Soon I became too weak to leave the burrow. I crawled to the doorway and ate snow. For sustenance, I slurped worms from the earthen walls. It was not enough, and I knew it. Only then, in the quiet and peace and fear of approaching death, did I become truly silent. Only then did I hear the voice of my mother. I heard her in my dreams, the low, rushing voice like music made into water. "I am coming," she said. "I am coming because you are my baby." I smiled and slept. Next thing I knew, I was cold. Cold and wet and shivering, but awake. I shot up and screamed as my skin brushed the thick, flower-matted hide of my mother. I spun around, smiling, and froze. Mother lay beside me, panting. Blood seeped from 100 wounds, crusting her hair. The exposed bones in her face were crushed and concave, leaking gore and blood. Without opening her eyes, she smiled. "I heard you, I heard your song." Tears blurred my vision. My chest began to hitch. I couldn't draw breath. It was like I was sick again, drowning in pus and trapped fluid. Only I wasn't dying this time. My mother was. "Then stay," I said. "You have to stay because you can hear my song." "No," she said. "You needed to see me again, but you do not need me." "I need you, Mama, I need you." "No," she said. "I killed all who would harm you." "But what about the forest? The forest will kill me without you." She chuckled. Her breath came, terribly fast and increasingly weak. "You are of me, remember, you are of me. You are my baby." My mother, my beautiful, ancient mother, drew a shallow breath and lay still. I lay beside her for many days. Then, when she began to stink, I left. A hiker eventually found me. A stupid, solitary hiker with a soft heart, a great deal of patience, and no fear. When I learned to speak the words of men, the authorities lost no time in telling me that mother was not really my mother. They discovered my identity, at least in a manner of speaking, through DNA. My real mother, they say, was a vagrant, a Jane Doe who lived in a tent in the national park. She was alone and defenseless, two things that attract human monsters. After a brief stint in jail for loitering, my mother ended up kidnapped, imprisoned, and tortured by an as yet unidentified assailant who eventually tried unsuccessfully to dissolve her in acid. They think he attempted to dissolve my body, too. That's why I am covered in scars. It is why I frightened those hunters so long ago. The acid burns make me look like a monster to men. Since my real mother apparently died long ago, they decided that mother, whoever she was nothing but a crazy, homeless child abuser. But I know better. Even so, I adapted. I had no choice. I am of my mother, but I live among men. That's what animals must do. Their young learn, grow, and adapt. If they don't, they die. But I am not adapting anymore. At least, I am not adapting to live among men. My mouth is changing in ways that are terrible to people, but wonderful to me. It's my teeth, you see. I am growing my mother's beautiful teeth. Looking at my teeth in the mirror was frightening and electrifying. Joy and terror ran through my veins in equal measure. It had to mean something. So I fell silent, I became sincere, I listened. And I heard. I heard the voice of my mother, low and rushing, like birdsong turned to a wild river. She tells me I do not belong with men, because I am her heart, and her heart is the forest. She tells me I must return. And she tells me she is waiting for me, because I am her baby. You've reached the end of the book.